Hello everybody, my name is Michael from the Fairbanks Museum, and today we're going to be talking about what to do if you find an injured or sick or strangely acting animal this spring in Vermont. So now that springtime is coming around, people are going to be more active outside, and of course animals are also going to be more active in the world around us. As a result, it's going to be more common for us to find animals that are hurt or sick, or even animals that are acting in ways that they aren't supposed to be acting. So today we're going to be talking about what you can do if you come across any of these animals. So I hope that we all know that the very first rule of working with sick and injured animals is that you should never try to approach or pick up an animal right away that you think might be having problems. So particularly when you're thinking about birds or other small animals, if you do anything to approach them or pick them up, you could injure them worse. It could make any kind of problem that they're having even worse for that animal, because particularly with birds, they have a very fragile skeleton. And if they already have an injured bone, just picking them up or moving them could make it much worse for that animal. So if we can't help them right away by picking them up and moving them, what can we do for any animal that we might find out in the woods? So, like with birds, as we've been talking about, if you find a bird that's injured, you might notice that it can't fly, or it can't fly very well, or it might seem stunned. It might not even seem to notice that you're nearby. These are all signs that there might be something wrong with this bird. If you see this, and you should try to watch that animal for at least a few minutes to make sure that there is something wrong with that animal, what you should do is call the Vermont Department of Fish and Wildlife. The people in the Department of Fish and Wildlife will either know exactly what to do in a situation like this, and they could tell you that, maybe in this situation you can try to pick up this animal, put it in a box, and bring it to a rehabilitation center, or they will help you to get in contact with an expert who can come and take care of the animal. Many times, if you find a bird that's been hit by a car, or a bird that has crashed into a window of your house, or has some other injury, there are places all across the state and all across America where there are experts who help to rehabilitate these birds, which means that it's kind of like a hospital for the birds. At these places, they will take in birds and they will feed them and care for them and help them to heal to the point where they can return to the natural environment. And this is really the best case scenario. It's what we hope for all sick or injured animals. So there are people who help to rehabilitate birds and also mammals. However, sometimes animals can't be rehabilitated, and they might have to be put down or something like that. We shouldn't necessarily feel bad about these things. It's unfortunately sometimes how things are out in nature. But we should never take matters like this into our own hands. We should always trust the experts, either who work for Fish and Wildlife or who work for these rehabilitation centers. So I will send you all a map made by Vermont Fish and Wildlife that shows you exactly where these rehabilitation centers can be found in Vermont, and it gives you their phone numbers and the animals that they specialize in caring for. So the next time that you run into an animal that you might question there's something wrong with, you can immediately find these phone numbers and give these people a call. That will be really, for a lot of animals, the difference between continuing to live a happy life and dying, right? So it is, if you do have an interest in taking care of the natural environment, it is good to try to help these animals, particularly when humans are at fault for the injuries that birds have in the first place. Very interesting to know is that in Vermont and all across the world, one of the most serious dangers to wild bird populations are actually house cats and the feral cats that were once house cats generations ago. These animals can kill juvenile birds, can kill even adult birds, and in some places are really causing a very serious problem for bird populations. So, on top of cars and houses and human structures, even, human pets can be dangerous to animals. So it's important to keep in mind, the issues that we cause for these wild animals also. So we spoke a little bit about birds, and before we start to talk about mammals that you might find, let's talk about baby animals of all kinds. This is probably the time when humans make the most mistakes when trying to help animals. A lot of the time, you might find a baby deer or even a baby black bear or a lot of types of baby birds that just seem to be lost or abandoned by their mothers. They're out in the open, they're not doing anything, they're trying to hide, and you might think that that baby animal is in trouble, right? You might think that the mother has lost it, or maybe the baby is starving or something like that. 9 times out of 10, that baby is totally fine. Lots of mothers throughout the whole animal kingdom, whether they're birds or mammals or even some types of lizards do this. The mothers will leave the baby animal in a safe spot where they're hidden from predators and other animals, and they can leave that baby there all day long. For instance, if you find a baby deer that's hidden in a thicket of maybe briars or something like that, that baby deer's mother left it there on purpose, and the mother is going to spend its time during the day maybe foraging in a totally different part of the forest. But that mother is going to return to the baby at the end of the day and basically pick the baby back up and continue along with it. This is a strategy that a lot of animal mothers have for taking care of their babies, and it's confusing to humans because it's very different from how we take care of our babies. So if you see a baby animal that seems to be lost or alone or stranded, you should not get close to it. You should not try to pick it up or approach it. You should never try to pick up a baby deer, ever, for any reason. If you do try to get close to these animals, if you try to pick that animal up, it could make things really terrible. That animal doesn't have a problem. It's sitting waiting for its mother to return, but if you try to get involved, you can make a problem for that animal. If you scare off that baby deer, and it can run miles off into the forest, and then it will be lost from its mother. Then the deer won't be in the spot where its mother left it, and that could have a terrible result, right? So you always want to leave baby animals where they are if you find them in the woods. If you think that maybe there might be a problem with this baby animal, maybe it might be injured or something like that, you should watch it, but try to watch it from as far away as possible. Most animals have much better senses than we do. The mother deer won't come back to get the baby if it knows that there's a person waiting around nearby. So if you want to see that baby be healthy and succeed, you try to keep track of it, but try to keep track from as far away from it as possible so that its mother can help it out as much as possible. So that's what's important to know about baby animals. Now we'll move on to mammals and adult mammals. So now let's try to think about what to do if we find an adult mammal that might be injured or sick. So a very serious rule when you're dealing with adult mammals is that you never want to get close to them. Oftentimes, if you find an adult animal that is injured or sick, it will try to defend itself or try to run away if you get near it. Both of these can be very dangerous. If an injured animal tries to escape and run away, it could end up hurting itself even further. And if the animal decides to try to fight you, obviously this poses a danger to you for many reasons we'll talk about in a moment. You've probably heard about rabies, which is a neurological disease that affects mammals' brains. So wild animals can get rabies, but humans can also get rabies. It passes between mammals through body fluids, a lot of the time through saliva. If you're bitten by a rabid animal, you can get rabies yourself. And for humans, rabies can be deadly and have terrible effects on your body. A way to spot rabid animals: if you see an animal that's normally nocturnal, like a skunk or a coyote, and you see them out during the daytime, and they're out in the open, and they might be acting strangely, then you have good reason to think that that animal might be rabid, and you should stay far away from it. When animals have rabies, they can become aggressive. The disease can actually make those animals attack other animals around them. So a rabid animal might run after your dog, or even you, or something like that. So rabies is very dangerous, and it's a big reason why we have to be careful with mammals. Even animals like bats carry rabies. But mammals also have many other viruses and bacteria that can be very dangerous for humans. And animals that carry these sometimes deadly viruses and bacteria might look totally normal to us, because even if it doesn't make them sick, it can make us very sick. For instance, there's a type of bacteria in the saliva of raccoons that is actually deadly to humans. So we should try as much as possible to stay away from any type of adult mammal. So, just in the same case as with birds, if you see a mammal that is sick or injured, the very first thing that you should do is call the Vermont Department of Fish and Wildlife. What they will probably do next, if they don't send an officer or a game warden or something like that to come help you, you should also call a mammal rehabilitation center. There are quite a few throughout Vermont, and they will either give you advice or send an expert to come and help you. Dealing with injured mammals can be very tricky. We might want to help out this animal, but you should know that the very best thing that you should do is be cautious and call an expert. So we've talked about contacting the Department of Fish and Wildlife if you find an animal that's sick or injured. But there are other times that you should also call the Department of Fish and Wildlife. For instance, if you find what people call a problem animal, animals that become too used to being around humans, whether it's because they're being fed by humans or they're eating humans, the trash that we leave out. Animals can sometimes become so used to being around humans that they show up all the time, and they even sometimes really intrude on human life. You may have heard of bears sometimes breaking into people's houses, raccoons that live, all in people's backyards, in their trash cans, things like that. Animals should not be living like this around humans. It's not natural for the animals, and it's also dangerous for people. If you find or know about an animal that has been causing trouble with people or pets, you should definitely call the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and they will find some way to deal with this animal. Usually, an animal that has been a problem in the past will be tagged. Sometimes you'll see a bear with a tag on its ear. That means that that bear has been a problem in the past. And particularly if you see a bear with a tag on both of its ears, that means that that is really a troubled bear. Usually these animals are moved around. If a bear is troubling a neighborhood, they'll tranquilize it and they may move it far away. But if it continues to be a trouble, seeing those tags is a good way of knowing immediately that that bear is probably a problem. But outside of even troubled animals, if you see rare animals in Vermont, these include things like the pine marten, which is a relative to the weasel, with brown fur, or if you see a mountain lion. Everybody knows about mountain lions and how rare they are in Vermont. They're legendarily rare. Even things like Canada lynx. If you see any animals like this, it's worthwhile to call the Vermont Department of Fish and Wildlife, because they will be able to track these animals. They will use that knowledge of that animal to add to all of the scientific data that they have. So animals that might be endangered or animals that are rare, it's important to know as much information about those animals as possible. Because if we want to help those animals survive in Vermont, we need to know exactly how many there are, where they're living, what they're doing, and how humans might be causing trouble for them. So it's very important, if you see rare animals, to call the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And the final reason that you might want to call, which is unfortunately a sad reason, even sadder than finding a sick or injured animal, is finding human beings who are doing illegal things in the outdoors. For instance, maybe more common years ago, but even still, if you find an animal that has been caught in a trap and left in that trap, the trap hasn't been collected by the trapper, that's a reason to call the Department of Fish and Wildlife, because it's against the rules. It's illegal to leave your trap lines for too long to put animals in danger of dying on a trap or something like that. If you find people poaching fish or hunting illegally on your property, those are all reasons to call the Department of Fish and Wildlife, not only because they're doing things that are illegal, but because they are directly harming the animals that live naturally in the environment around you. So those are 3 additional reasons to get into contact with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I hope that this has helped you to understand a little bit more of exactly how to deal with animals that might be sick, injured, rare, or if you see any evidence of people causing harm to animals. These are all things that we may run into this spring as things warm up and we spend more time outside. So it's good to be aware of exactly what to do in these situations. So thank you very much for tuning in today. I'm Michael Simoniello from the Fairbanks Museum.